Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's me, Shih-Chi, and with me today, as you can see, I've got my friend Vanessa Holding. Vanessa works in the area of video media and has been really successful with a company. I invited Vanessa here to talk to us today because she has been sharing tips and techniques with me for the last 3 years. And I thought that it was about time that I actually got her on so that she can share her tips and techniques with you. Now, the great thing after this interview is if you want to follow Vanessa, she actually does a weekly tips section that, well, make sure that you get all of the information at the end. So, ladies, gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Vanessa from Arc and Crown Media. Arc and Crown started when two women, both coming from different sides of the video production industry, came together to develop high quality digital media content at no frills value, which is pretty amazing now that we're all in this space. Having grown up on set, Vanessa's father is in the business. Vanessa has always been fascinated by the power of video. Now her company helps corporate communicators, marketers, and learning and development professionals get their point across. Vanessa takes their important, complex, and sometimes dull content and produces it in a way that gets attention and compels action. And I've seen some of those videos, and what she's done with them using graphics, just using talking heads is pretty amazing. Thank you for being here today with me, Vanessa. So let's get started. I know before I started recording, we had some back and forth, about my background and what's working and not working. And well, why don't I toss it over to you for you to say a couple of words?
Sure, yeah. So, well, as everyone knows, and as we're doing here today, everything has gone virtual. And it's a different landscape out there now. I personally have been using Zoom for a number of years because my team is all remote, and so are all of our contractors. So to be able to hop on a video call and have that face-to-face human connection, which I think there's definitely something to be said about video over just a telephone call. This is something that we're all, being tasked to do more in our day-to-day lives. And I do think for the foreseeable future, even as people start going back to working in their business, like in their office space, we're still going to be seeing more people not wanting to connect face-to-face, whether it's clients or partners, contractors. So this is something that we all need to get more comfortable with. And I think there's definitely a few little tips and tricks that will make the experience a lot more seamless. And at the end of the day, the tips that I've been sharing have really been all about doing things to avoid distractions.
Yeah, and before you go there, Vanessa, I just want to say this has kind of broken the lid open, right, on working on Zoom. I mean, I've had the platform for quite a while, but people are hesitant. And before everything happened in March, I mean, we had alternatives. We could meet over coffee, we could do other stuff. But I'm coming across clients now who have never used the platform and so are looking to see what's the best tool to use, how do they use it, are they doing it correctly? So I think in that light, what you have to offer is absolutely fabulous. So tips and
Yeah.
techniques, go for it.
Yeah, well, I do just want to start off by saying that, to the distraction point, we all know that, especially in this situation right now, there's certain things that we can't avoid. We are in our home settings, so we have to use what we have available to us. I'm in my living room. It looks like you're, in an office setting. Sometimes people have their family or their children, running around in the background.
Yes.
And there's some funny things like that in the news recently. And to a degree, we are all human. And I would say, don't be too uptight about it. I think especially in this time, we all understand that people are, dealing in the best way that they can right now.
Sure.
But what I do want to provide here today is just a few, pieces of advice that can help you, level up and just come across as professional as you can, because again, that's what we're all striving for, working within the, the limitations that we have right now.
Yeah.
So,
I know that you actually have been doing presentations on this, so why don't I just let you share what you have with our audience? It's going to be much better than my trying to direct the questions. So go for it.
Perfect. So I will just open up this presentation that I had created in conjunction with another actual mutual friend of ours, Laurel Carr. We produced this this little presentation for our networking group to share with them. Actually, it was right at the end of March that we put this together when everything happened and we had to move our networking meetings online. So this presentation is a little bit more focused on if you're doing a larger group meeting, but certainly a lot of the tips will also be relevant for individuals that are just having one-to-one video calls, or in the case that you ever want to conduct a formal webinar where you invite, quite a large number of people, and normally in a traditional webinar, the host is the only person on camera and everyone else is just tuning in and listening in. So in terms of these tips for best practices of hosting, the first tip is to, if possible, have two hosts in the meeting. And the benefit to that is there are a lot of really cool tools that come along with different video platforms like a Zoom, where you can do things such as set up a waiting room. This has become more and more important when the term Zoom bombing has come into our vernacular, because unfortunately there are some people who are jumping in on people's personal video or webinar calls. So having a person that's sort of running the meeting and speaking, and then also having somebody else behind the scenes who's a co-host that can let people in that are in the waiting room and mute and unmute people as needed, that's definitely a best practice. I would recommend, whether, again, it's a large group meeting or even a one-to-one meeting like today, definitely if you're the host, try and arrive a few minutes early so that when the individual that you're talking to or multiple individuals come in, and if there is a waiting room, they don't have to wait very long and they're accepted right away. Otherwise, if people aren't used to this, they could kind of get confused or wonder what's going on. So definitely try to get people into the meeting as quickly as possible. When there are multiple participants on the meeting, it can get a little bit hectic if multiple people start talking at the same time. So it is best practice to mute all participants or ask them to mute themselves and only unmute when they're looking to talk. If you have a small group or if it's just a one-to-one discussion, of course, that's sort of irrelevant, and you would just kind of continue on as normal.
If I can pipe in here, what I've seen in large group meetings is that the presenter actually has it's kind of like operating procedures for the meeting, and they go through and they state expectations. And I've found that those are really effective because it tells people, hey, check and make sure that you're on mute and I will unmute you, or whatever the case may be, like whatever parameters they want to set up. So like setting all of this up and actually articulating that to the attendees is a really good idea. That way they know what to expect as a meeting starts.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And that I guess is mentioned on this slide, an agenda. And I totally agree, having an agenda. So people know what the process is, what to expect, what's happening next, so they don't have to guess, and they're kind of aware of what's next, is definitely best practices for sure.
Nice.
All right, so I'll move on to the next slide. This actually kind of feeds into what you just mentioned, which is explain the options and the agenda and everything at the beginning. So if there are certain features that you want your attendees to utilize, so again, if you're hosting a larger meeting or a webinar, certainly getting your attendees to utilize the chat feature, where they can either, again, request to speak, or maybe they want to mention a technical challenge that they're facing. Or in some cases, when I've conducted a webinar a few weeks ago, I asked people to pipe in with their comments or feedback in the chat, and then I could monitor that as I was conducting the webinar, and then occasionally kind of speak to those questions or prompts that they had. Also in Zoom, and I think a few other platforms, in addition to just the chat feature, there's also a Q&A box, which I think is only in the paid version of Zoom, I believe. But again, if you're conducting more of a formal meeting or an actual series of webinars, I would suggest the paid version. There's a lot of additional features. And the Q&A one is a great one because it keeps everything in one space, and it doesn't disappear or go up the ladder until you check off that you've answered that question. So that's really helpful.
Nice.
Yeah, closing the meeting on time and just being respectful of everyone's time that you have with you is definitely helpful, and disconnecting the call so that nobody else has to wonder how they get out of here or how they disconnect.
Right.
And then, yeah, as mentioned, monitoring the chat. If you have two people, like two hosts, that's best practice. So one person can continue on with content and the other person can be kind of checking for that.
That's great.
Now, in terms of how to maximize engagement, we already mentioned set an agenda. Definitely keep the content tight. There really is almost more content than ever being posted right now, because people, have the time to market and people are hungry for information. So just make sure that you're, keeping it as concise as possible. Set the rules of engagement. So again, people know what they're to expect and what is expected of them. I actually just did this before I got on here, was, on my Slack channel, which all of my my team members are on and they can chime in at any point. I always pause my notifications for an hour, 2 hours, however long I'm going to be on a call for, so that it's not an annoying little dinging sound in the background.
That's a good one, actually.
Mm-hmm. And as mentioned earlier, we are all humans, so things do pop up, animals, children, spouses, but I would say just plan as well as you can by letting everyone in your household know when you're going to be on video chat and how long for, and again, at the end of the day, just to avoid as many distractions as possible so people can focus on you and the message that you're trying to deliver.
The other thing I would add in here too is that people are learning the platform. So I notice that I have a lot more leeway for people when they say, oh, hang on for a minute, I need to do this and do that, right? So for example, as we were recording, I realized, maybe I should have my face in there too. And so I went in and I switched the speaker view to gallery view after there's only two of us. It's not like a 10 or 20 or 30 people. So I find that if people are actually a little bit more forgiving, and that comes into the other stuff, like other possible distractions that may occur.
Yeah, I definitely feel like we've almost, with our self-isolation, we've almost become hungry for more connection, and people are, I think, more forgiving of things than ever before, and people are just being more honest and open. So it's kind of creating this level of intimacy that we didn't have as much before of in a workplace setting. So
absolutely.
it's interesting.
Yeah. What's next?
All right, so we'll go on to a few technology tips. So as you mentioned, there are a lot of different platforms that you can choose from to host your video calls or webinars. We are using Zoom today. Zoom is certainly my favorite application. I've been using it for several years now, and I've personally never had any issues with it. There has been one case where I do a group call, a mastermind, and there was one gentleman that consistently wasn't able to turn on his video because it would just be staticky. So he would just shut off his video and stay on audio instead so that we could all hear him properly. He recognized that it was his internet speeds. So after, I think, the second meeting we had, he decided to increase his internet to more high speed, and now he's able to come on. So
Nice.
just something to kind of keep in mind. Google Hangouts is another great free version. If you use a Gmail account, it's really easy and effective from there. I know WebEx is a popular platform for corporations as well as Microsoft Teams. Again, if you're a Microsoft 365 user, I think Microsoft Teams comes free with that. So there's really a lot of similarities between them, few differences, but it's really, I think, more about your personal preference. In some cases, I believe some organizations don't utilize Zoom due to some security concerns. But from recent articles I've read, they suggest that if you do put the proper measures in place of, for example, not putting out your Zoom link in a public setting, like only sending it to the proper people that will be on the call, as well as creating a waiting room as mentioned, so you only allow people into the call that you know are coming into it. With all of those features, there is less to worry about. But with whatever platform you choose, certainly testing it and experimenting with all of the features is the number one thing I suggest. And you know, I have a mother who oftentimes struggles with technology, and I try to walk her through, you know, different social media platforms. And of course, recently we've been on all these different video platforms trying to stay in touch. And what I find sometimes with her and with other individuals, there can be a sense of overwhelm. And what you need to recognize is at the end of the day, you're not going to blow up your computer by touching buttons on Zoom. So, you know, I would recommend just hopping on with a friend and just clicking every single button and just seeing what it all does. There are quite a few options of fun features. You can add a virtual background. So just don't be worried. And once you experiment with it and do it a couple of times, you'll get more comfortable, and then it'll be a breeze. Because at the end of the day, you know, as you can probably attest to, setting up a video call is pretty simple, like scheduling it and then sending it out to the person that you're going to want to talk to. What I find with technology, the biggest issue is when something that you haven't experienced before arises, and then you're kind of like, what is this? This is something that I haven't experienced before. And again, what I recommend to my family and others is Google is our best friend. If you've experienced something, it's very likely that somebody else there has had that same experience. Oh. And if you Google the question or Google the concern that you're facing, you likely will be able to find a few articles and maybe even a YouTube video to kind of walk you through, you know, what's happening. I'll give a quick example. With the virtual backgrounds, a lot of people I know are popping them on and they're beautiful, great. When I'm on my cell phone on Zoom, I can put a virtual background on, but when I'm on my computer, it doesn't work properly for me. And after some Googling, I discovered it's because of the version of iOS that I have is too old to allow that.
Yeah, and I just have to say, I mean, I like that you have experiment up here, because I find that when it comes to technology, the learning really is the doing. It doesn't matter how many times I read about it. Sometimes I have to have the words on paper next to me as I'm fiddling around, right? Like literally just working it at the same time. So it's really learning by doing. And like that's beats back to my comment earlier. People have the bandwidth now to be gracious about that kind of stuff. So I think what I'm taking away from everything you're saying is go right ahead, try it out, try all the functionalities. If it's with your friend, awesome. But if it pops up live, then just go with it, right? Just flow with it and adjust accordingly.
For sure. Yeah. And it'll always get better with time and experience.
Very true.
All right, so I'll move on to the last slide I have for you here, and it's regard to the visual do's and don'ts. So this is more along the lines of the content that I've been helping people with recently, okay. And both for video calls and webinars through your webcam, but I've also been helping people with how to shoot great video using their cell phones. And so I'll just go through these prompts first. Okay. So the first one, use visual aids. So obviously, like we're doing here today, I think, you know, having some sort of a visual presentation, if it makes sense, is certainly helpful for the viewers. I'm very much a visual learner. So when I hear something and I'm listening to somebody in a podcast or a webinar like you're doing here today, I won't retain as much information than if I were to read it on a screen or see something that would help prompt my memory for it. So again, if you're trying to help people walk away with material that they can utilize, having a visual reference is positive. Don't dress differently. This was more so in reference to our networking group, and it was just kind of a reminder that we are still in a professional setting. We're trying to, you know, present ourselves in a certain light. So we just wanted to make sure that was kind of put in there.
So no jammies.
No jammies, ideally. Yeah.
And get fully dressed. There have been instances of, right, just, yeah, so get fully
Yeah,
dressed. Go ahead.
and I will actually also just mention what I always do, and I see you've done it today too, is I try to wear a bright, solid color. It in our our video production business, we always recommend that to clients when they're going to be on interview, because it comes across best on camera. As you can see, my background, I have gray walls. It's fairly dark back there because we're a bit overcast here today, but I really pop on camera. And same with you. You're wearing a beautiful, like, ready coral shirt, and it not only makes your face light up a little bit more, but it makes you pop against your background, which is helpful. I do recommend avoiding really, really small patterns, because that can sometimes appear weird on camera. And then the other 2 points I have for you is don't film from above or below eye level. So in this case, my height, I'm very short, I'm 5'2". So, with my laptop, it's able to be on my desktop, and it's a pretty good eye line. But for some individuals, if you are a very tall person, and, it may appear more up or down for you, what you can do is just stack some books underneath your laptop to help get it to the proper eye line, just so it's the most flattering that it can be on you. And, I mentioned natural light. I'm personally using a ring light here today. It's a piece of equipment that I bought off Amazon for about $130. There are other ring lights that are even more cost effective. Again, a quick Amazon search could, for ring light.
Does it mean anything when you say ring light? Like, how is that different from a lamp?
Yeah, I mean, just the way it's distributing the light, being in a full circle, definitely flattering on you. Also, my light does, actually, I can probably show you right here. I can make it see more.
Oh, look at that.
So this is what we call tungsten lighting, but because I have natural light coming in from my windows in my house, I turn it to like the blue setting instead of the red setting, which makes it more what we call daylight. Nice. And then also you can improve the intensity. So right now I have it on a fairly low setting. This is the highest one. So you can see actually it brightens my face even more and makes the background darker, versus if I just kind of make it kind of the halfway, then it's...
Oh, interesting. Wow, I'm learning a lot just by listening to you. I have to tell you, when I started recording myself, I literally went up and down stairs, different corners, looking at the background, and I realized on my patio, I actually have like almost floor to ceiling doors, and the natural lighting that comes in from there is amazing. And so anytime I do a recording, I choose to do it at about like 1 or 2 in the afternoon, because that's optimum timing, like for the light, right, that comes in. Today, unfortunately, and you've already said this, it's a little gray outside, so I've got like all of the lights on around me, and I find that that's sufficient. So I seem to have found this little corner in my house, and like I ain't moving from this. So
no, that's exactly what I would recommend, is walking around your home, even with your laptop or with your cell phone, and just kind of determining what makes the most sense. For me, in my house, I'm in a fairly narrow townhouse, and where the windows are placed, it's nowhere near a desk or any sort of place that I could put my laptop. So although, using natural light is definitely great, in my situation, a ring light is pretty necessary. Otherwise, I'd be fully backlit. I actually could show you that too. This is what it would look like if I had no light on me right now.
Got it.
So it's for me, it was a really good investment, because this is something that I, am going to be doing long-term, filming content and taking video calls in my home.
Got it.
But
so good to know.
If you can only use natural light, then what you really want to do is just make sure you're getting that in front of you. If you have a window behind you, that's called being backlit, and that's when there's light all around you and you look dark on your face. So you want to always make sure you're turning towards the window, so the natural light, you take advantage of that, basically.
I have to tell you, when we were going to do this, I was a little nervous. I started looking, I've been recording, and then I thought, I actually, behind me, had my degree up there, and I've actually had people say to me, did you graduate from? And I was like, how do you know? Well, of course, it wasn't the degree behind me. And I thought today, well, no, I don't want any distractions. After all, we're going to be talking about, how you present yourself over over a visual media. So I ended up taking it down. I don't know if you can see anything behind me, but do you have any tips and techniques for one should have behind you? I don't know if you have that coming next, but I thought I would ask.
Yeah, no, definitely. So again, for me, when I'm on a video call, this is the background that works best for me because I'm able to put my head in a fashion where I am in front of the window. So I sort of block
Yep.
a little bit.
Yep.
If I turn my camera to this way, then you can see my ring light in my mirror that's there. So yeah, I kind of had to work my background to make it work for me. However, when I actually do I film on my cell phone, then I actually, my ring light has a cell phone holder on it. So it becomes a stand for my cell phone as well. So that way I don't need to rely on having a table. I can actually put my ring light anywhere I want in my house and change up my background. So when I do that, I actually flip it around. So this location, which is where my desk is, and a blank wall with a picture on it, that becomes my background. It's a little bit cleaner and it's a little bit more of a office looking environment. So that's what I like to do for when I record my videos.
Very nice. Do you recommend, like, instead of my degree, maybe a picture? Should I like put some nice fabric, wallpaper up? Like, what do you say? Like, should it be busy or should it just be plain when people are talking?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it depends on the situation. Again, when I do my videos that I want people to focus on my message and I may want to add graphic text or different things into the video, then I like to do a pretty plain background
Nice.
so that you can add graphics and it doesn't feel too busy. We've actually also done something with previous videos where we bought cardboard, like big sheets of cardboard and wallpapered the cardboard and then use stands to hold that up. And if you are wanting to create a different look, and for example, let's say you just have a blank white wall and you wanted to have something, a little bit more unique, like the look of a brick wall, or in the case of what we did, it was kind of like a marble looking wall. You can do something like that. It's pretty cost effective. I think it costs maybe about $50 for the supplies. And then that way you can kind of switch up your look and it's still something very clean and simple. So not to distract too much. But it's, a little bit fancier than say just a blank wall.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Great suggestions.
Yeah, no problem. And the last thing I would mention, because this is something else that I always think about when I'm on calls with people, is the framing. So mainly headroom. So I like to position my head quite close to the top of the frame. I do find I see quite a few people that kind of do something like this, where you see too much or they're kind of positioned quite low in the frame. So I think you and I are a good examples of proper framing. I might have a little bit less headroom than you do, but it's not too much or too distracting. I think we're both sort of the appropriate framing.
I've always been told that kind of like three fingers. So I try not to do this because, I already have a big head and you don't need me to overwhelm the screen. So I like to back up just a bit.
For sure. Yeah, no, I think yours looks great.
Thank you. Wow, that was a lot. Did you have anything else for us, Vanessa? Because if people want to get in touch with you and to get more tips and techniques, or maybe even have you work with them on their videos or their webinars, where can they reach you?
Yeah, definitely. Well, my email is vanessa@arkandcrown.com. And I'm sure I can add that to to a comment on your LinkedIn video once you post this.
Absolutely.
And definitely engage with me on LinkedIn. I'm Vanessa Holding as in holding a phone. And you can find me there on LinkedIn. As you mentioned earlier, I'm trying to post about a video a week. It started out with a lot of technical tips at the beginning when all of this started. And I've moved in a little bit more to content. I actually just recorded one today all about storytelling. So that will be coming out next week. And yeah, definitely feel free to connect with me. The one thing I am helping people with right now is how to actually get their own video setup going, so they can film in their home. So, you know, what gear to buy, best practices for filming themselves, giving them tips and techniques on editing and actually showing them how simple editing can be to do the basics. And then in some cases, we're actually helping build the graphic sort of bumpers for our clients' videos. So we'll do the animated intro and outro, and then they can just record themselves and plug that into the middle. And then they have a way to kind of post consistent, professional, good quality, but very cost-effective content.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.